Hello, this is Dr. Tom Groover from the National Community Rights Network, and I'm here with author Anneke Campbell, who has written a book which I think will be recognized in history, called We the People. Hi, Anneke.
Hi. Well, that's a nice way to put it. It's
Well,
called We the People: Stories from the Community Rights Movement in the United States.
Yes, and the book, of course, I wanted to inform everyone that I've read it cover to cover. I think it's a great book, and it tells the story of the community rights movement and a whole new way of organizing, because we have now the cry for local community organizing that's going on post the 2016 presidential election. And this is something that I think is historically very important for everyone to understand, because when you say organize, what you can do is create a group that does something in unison, or you can actually create a movement. And there's a big distinction between those two. And that's part of what we're here to talk about today. So Anneke, can you talk about how you got involved in writing this book?
Sure. I, met Thomas Lindsay in 2004. He was giving a presentation at the Bioneers Conference, which is a conference that sort of unites social justice and environment and many other interrelated issues. And Tom was speaking as the founder of the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. And my husband and I were both there, and we were so struck by the clarity of his understanding of why environmental activism isn't producing the results that we want, and an understanding of the way the legal system has made it impossible to have real sustainability in this country. And so after his presentation, we went up to him and said, my husband's a filmmaker and I'm a writer, and we said we'd like to do some project with him. And he said, actually, I don't want to be part of a film or anything like that. But he invited us to participate in the Democracy School, which is a vehicle for education about our system. And we did it a few times, and then we filmed it. And then at a certain point, maybe 3 years later, Tom was approached by a publisher who wanted to do a book about his work. And Tom said, I don't have time, but I know a writer who does. And so that was the first iteration of this current book was called Be the Change: How to Get What You Want in Your Community. And that was written, I think, in 2007. And the second version, which is We the People: Stories from the Community Rights Movement in the United States, really traces all the work that's been done since 2007. And the work has evolved in many ways. And researching what is going on with the community rights movement, we didn't even have that name for what we were doing back in 2007. Seeing how the work is evolving has been inspirational, and sort of seeing the individuals who are holding this work and seeing the evolution has been, I'm repeating myself, it's been inspirational. And when I first took on the rewrite and the update of the book, I thought, oh, this won't take very long. It's an update. And in fact, it's at least 2/3 of this is an entirely new book. So that's why we have a new publisher, PM Press. We have a new title, We the People: Stories from the Community Rights Movement in the U.S. And we have many, many new stories and the evolution of community rights networks, the work abroad, and this book covers all of that.
Yes, and it does so very well. And for those listening, if you're interested in getting a copy of this book, which I highly recommend, PM Press. This is a small publishing company that focuses on more evolutionary subjects regarding social change and movements, social movements. And you can get them online. You can go to PM Press directly. Or if you want to, you could go right to the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund website and go to their resources pages. That's celdf.org. And you can go there and pick up this book. I ordered mine, and I can't remember how I got it, but either way, you'll get there. I'm pretty sure I went straight to the PM Press website because I've bought books from them before, and a really amazing publisher. Anneke, the interesting thing that I find is that you describe in your book the origins of the community rights movement having come from really an organic need, starting with a law firm that was basically a standard environmental law firm, except for the fact that these visionaries that started it were interested in offering free legal services to communities to help protect them from environmental harms. And
That's right.
yeah, and so can you describe just in a nutshell how that has evolved from, conventional environmental law to the building of an actual movement?
Yes, I think I probably can.
I'll help you.
So it started really with the people who were working in this nonprofit law firm being approached by people over and over to try to protect their communities from things like sludge dumping, mining, water withdrawal, things that big corporations were doing and that the communities didn't want because those operations were harmful. And what they realized as they went through the conventional route that environmental law firms go through, which is to fight for better regulation, to go to the EPA and say, this is actually harming the community, so we need stricter standards, we need less harm, and don't pass that permit. The environmental impact statement wasn't right, so let's try to fight to get a new one. Sort of all the ways of working within the regulatory system. And what they realized was over and over and over that they might win the particular battle, but in the end, they still lost the war in terms of the corporation would just come back with their $million lawyers and they would just rework something and come at it again in another direction. Or so what they realized was that that eventually they realized that the regulatory system, the environmental regulatory system, was actually not protecting communities at all. It was in fact allowing harm, and that communities had no right to say no to harm. That is built into the law in this country, that they can say only this much, or they can try to say only this much, but they can't actually say, no, you don't get to mine in my community right next to my school. And when they realized that, they started asking people in the communities that they were trying to protect, well, okay, so we know what you don't want. What do you want? Let's try to rethink how to fight this battle to protect yourselves. And the community said, what we want is to be able to say no based in our values, what we actually want, what we stand for, instead of what we're standing against. And so the community started writing, with the help of CELDF, local law ordinances and eventually bills of rights, which is part of the evolution of what happened. Local laws saying no mining can happen, no corporate activity without our approval in our community. They then realized that various aspects of the legal structures needed to be combated in order for the local law to stand, one of them being corporate personhood rights, because much of the ability to do harm is based on corporations having accrued these rights through many years of Supreme Court decrees that allow corporations to claim the same rights as people. They also realized that the Commerce Clause was part of this. And what happened was, as the communities and the nonprofit law firm, CELDF, started to see how the system was put together, they also presented a school to help people understand how we got where we are legally. And based on that, people started to look at what would a law look like in our community that would actually represent our values and protect us. And so local communities were able to pass these laws. So, for instance, in Pennsylvania, about 100 communities passed laws that banned industrial agriculture, tried to protect and things like industrial farming and so on. And other communities banned sludge dumping, and new communities in New Hampshire banned water withdrawal. And then over time, they realized that the local laws, in fact, were quite vulnerable to state intervention, and they started to, communities and CELDF started to realize that those laws were going to need to be protected in court, that states had a vested interest in not allowing that kind of local lawmaking, and thus it became evident that the system isn't working locally, it isn't working at the state level and the federal level, because it's also dependent on a lot of Supreme Court decisions. And so in the latest iteration of the work, people are actually coming together to form states' community rights networks that would start to come at, to pass by referendum or some other way, changes to state law and eventually state constitutions to enshrine community rights into those structures of law. Because right now, communities do not have rights. And that is, I think, the evolution of the work has really become very, very clear. Not only do communities not have rights, but nature has no rights. And that's the other part of the work that is revolutionary in that you can read about in the book, is that Tamaqua in Pennsylvania, tiny little town, actually passed a law that gave rights to nature. And then other communities started doing that. And then even a few countries have recognized that ecosystems have a right to exist and evolve. That's a big mouthful I just said, and so maybe you want to direct me a little more.
Well, that's the overview we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And next, wanted to make some distinctions. Mm-hmm. The movement grew organically. It grew from the needs of the people, causing the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund to entirely change their strategy. In fact, Thomas Lindsay told me that after they discovered that they were enabling corporations by appealing permits,
right?
You know, they were assisting corporations in writing better permits, that they closed their law firm. They just decided this is ethically and morally unacceptable, and they just shut the doors. And this is really interesting. Then they got a call, and somebody wanted to confront the actual system at that point and write laws that would protect their community, irrespective of all of the barriers that are established in our system of law to prevent local communities from exercising self-government of their own. And so they went ahead and did it, and actually stopped the harmful activity from going on, the sludge spreading or the hog farm moving into their neighborhood. So, that became extremely popular. It just spread like fire. Other communities found out about it, and the next thing you know, you've got hundreds of these things going on everywhere. I think that's fascinating how it started. And then we realized that with some of these other issues, like, for instance, currently the fracking industry, they don't just go on and accept, that we've written our own laws to protect our health, safety, and welfare, and to prohibit things that violate these inalienable rights of our community. They challenge us in court and preempt our laws. And so we're at that stage now where we realize we actually have to change our state constitutions to do away with preemption and corporate rights and anything that the corporate state has used to prevent us from exercising local community self-government. Then, so then there's another level which you were alluding to, and that is that the states have band together now. We have these state organizations, and we've band together to form a national organization to confront the actual DNA of our legal system, to actually confront the real nuts and bolts of the system that keeps this whole corporate state rolling over communities time and time and time again.
That's right.
Could you discuss that a little bit?
Well, actually, I think that this is sort of a very fledgling activity that is just starting as
Yes.
people are recognizing that the work is so much bigger than these. I mean, it starts in the small communities and some big ones. I mean, Pittsburgh passed their anti-fracking ordinance, I think in 2010, which was a huge victory. But as people are getting more involved and realizing how huge the fight is, they're banding together to create this national network. As all effective organizing really depends on networks of people and coalition building with other groups. And as I think is becoming more and more obvious, is that the environmental movement, which has been pitted against the labor movement and other movements in this country, social justice movements, actually it's all the same thing. All of these movements at bottom are coming up against a system that is unsustainable, that is broken, that was probably set up to be the way it is at a time when human rights were barely thought of, i.e. only white property owners had any rights, and also at a time when sustainability in terms of the environment and our ecology wasn't an issue, because it seemed the planet was endlessly huge and full of what was then considered resources instead of the natural world. But there wasn't the threat that our contemporary world faces. And so sort of I feel like this building of this network is in a way like immune cells in the body coming together and beginning to antibodies coming together to create a response to a massive infection that is really killing the life on the planet.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. I think about it in terms of actual genetic contamination. Like the original intent behind the early governance that occurred on this continent was to create a democracy, or at least a representative government that was local in its origin.
Right.
And the practice of local community self-government was necessitated from the very beginning by the fact that there was no existing government in this country that we were aware of. What we didn't know is that there was an incredible indigenous population here that had sustainability that we couldn't perceive. We thought it was as a race, the white people thought these indigenous people were savages because they weren't building huge cities and
Right.
and the reason they weren't is because they were living sustainably.
Not only that, the original Articles of Confederation were based on the Iroquois Articles of Confederation, and it wasn't until they started to be rewritten and in the production of the federal Constitution that we've lost some of those basic rights.
Yeah. So the people coming over the Mayflower, they had to form a pact and started the whole local community self-government movement right then, and it was the dominant culture. It was by far the reason why the Revolutionary War was fought, was because the king was encroaching and prohibiting local community self-government. And the new Constitution that came after the Articles of Confederation was written in secret. Most people don't know. They think it was like some hugely, public thing, but it was like basically how many people were there that signed it? I mean,
no, it was white men of property setting up a system to protect their property and their business interests. So that's what we're stuck with, and it's just gotten worse.
And we talk about property, we're talking about slaves.
Yeah, among other things. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was the driving force of the time. So our Constitution still exists today. It was written to protect property and commerce, and it legalized slavery and the return of runaway slaves. Mandated that.
Yeah.
And so what's happened is that we are living today at a time when our Constitution, which was written in medieval times, during the feudal system, is being applied to our contemporary life, and the means for actually rewriting that Constitution and bringing it up to date is so incredibly difficult. We have no alternative but to recognize that the system that's in place today that rolls over local communities is encoded in the DNA of the structure of law, which is based upon the Constitution and reinterpretations of the Constitution that have occurred ever since its creation.
That's right. And I think it's very difficult for people. I mean, on the one hand, the harms that are happening, that are accelerating in all these communities are bringing people to action. And at the same time, without a real understanding of how our system is put together and legal system, people are going to react instead of respond creatively to this situation. And I think that's what this work is most brilliant in showing, is that it's not just about saying no to a specific harm that is happening. It's about looking at how do we actually shift the mechanisms that allow this, the underlying at-root mechanisms, which have to do with the Constitution giving corporations way more rights than people. And but it's a very hard thing to face, and I think people. I've watched, in interviewing people and going to these communities, how wasn't when people, until they're right up against it and realizing that, oh, well, we passed a law, but you know what? The state just said we're not allowed to do that. We don't really have a democracy. It's like there's a moment of truth that breaks through the denial, which we've all inherited in sort of glorifying our U.S. Constitution as this amazing, wonderful document that protects us. In fact, it's not so, and it takes some heavy-duty reality to break through that denial. And then once the denial is broken through, then to have an actual creative, innovative way to go about shifting that, making change, recognizing the structures that need to change. It's a very daunting task. And I think it happens because we're at that point of such clear violation. And I think that's what's interesting about the moment we're in right now, post the 2016 election, where I think there's a tremendous opportunity for people to wake up to what's really happening. Because as long as the people in charge, i.e. the president and so on, seem benign and seem to be trying to protect us, then we feel like we don't have to do the work. And I think that this is a moment where so many people who care about these issues, and not only that, so many people on both sides of the political spectrum who care about these issues, even though they have different maybe ways of seeing it, have to deal with the fact that they're not going to be protected. The corporations are going to be given full reign to run over all of us. And so I think this is the exact right time, for us to really bring this book out and help educate people about what the underlying realities and root system causes are of the dilemma of the situation we're in. So it's a very pregnant moment for activism. And, it is my deep hope that people can take a breath and look at what is really the cause of this and go organize around that, not just be in reaction to, the figurehead that is about to be president.
Very nice. Yes, thank you for that. And I think that we have time for like one more consideration here. And if you don't mind, I would like to go into talking a little bit about the types of activism. And one type has to do with being reactive, like you're saying, and organizing around the opposition to a particular issue, whether it's fracking or water withdrawal or pipelines, as we have going on right now at Standing Rock.
That's right.
We have people that are in those movements who are waking up to the fact that, this is the same. We're all, up against the same thing.
That's right.
It just shows up in different issues. And so that's one type of organizing where we silo ourselves off into a particular passion, whether it be, a minimum wage or a living wage, or whether it be police brutality, or whether it be, the corporate, dominant disinformation system, or I don't know, there's a million of them out there. I could just spend the whole time talking about all these things.
and they all retain their power by pitting us against each other. And
Yes.
so it's crucial that we recognize that all these issues are interrelated. They're all rooted in the same problem, the system, the legal system, and the corporate system, which are the same thing at this point. And it's crucial that people look deeper. I think what's going on at Standing Rock is really inspirational, because it sort of goes back 400 years, and it combines indigenous rights, human rights, nature rights, and all that. But I fear, and I think the civil disobedience aspect is where we're going to have to go. And that's happening in Grant Township, Pennsylvania as well. People banned fracking, and the state said you can't. And they're saying, yes, we can, and we're going to enforce our own law by standing for it in front of the people who come to do it. And they actually passed an ordinance to legalize civil disobedience. So I think that civil disobedience is a huge tool, but I want it to be used wisely, not just in defense of one community and one issue, as you just pointed out, whether it be fracking or any of the other mining and so on issues, but to be used strategically. And I think that's, we have to get past reaction to response, creative, strategic, smart, interconnected, networked, building a movement response. That's what building a movement is all about. It's we've got to take a breath and not just run out on the street and go, no, no, no. We have to band together with all the different coalition, make a coalition with all the different groups that are really fighting the same fight underneath it all. And I feel like the work of CELDEF and the community rights movement gives a framework to understand what's going on and gives a path forward that is creative and responsive as opposed to reactive. And it's based in the values that we share and that we share with so many people on all sides of the political spectrum. And that's where the power of coming together is possible. And so I think all of us involved in this work, this is the time to really step up our communication about it. Because until people understand and are educated, I think they're going to go down the same old roads that have not led to accomplishment.
Right. And those roads were paved. Those roads were designed, built, and maintained by the regulatory system of government, the corporate state.
A very interesting moment right here where the president-elect will put someone in charge of the EPA who is a fossil fuel businessman. Right. And, I felt a flash of fear when I read that. And then I thought, well, finally it'll be obvious. Finally, people will stop thinking the EPA is going to protect them. And that is a good thing. So I think we're in a really powerful moment of clarity and opportunity.
Yes. And what I want to talk a little bit about is now you have a choice. Everyone here listening has a choice now to organize, like is being said now. Clearly, it's the time for that. And I agree with that. And then when you go to organize, and if you want to be effective and strategic and creative about the organization, one of the things that the community rights movement offers is a way of organizing that goes outside of what we call the regulatory system. And we feel like the regulatory system is the failed system, and that it can't be effectively restored. It can't be, modified. It can't be improved upon. That's the system of law that keeps us in a box of allowable activism, and so our actions become completely predictable. The corporations love it when we get ticked off and we and we stage these huge marches and we walk down, Madison Avenue with our signs and our chants, they think that's fantastic, because what we're doing is we're caught up in fighting against some harm, whether it's the Wall Street bankers or, we don't like GMOs or whatever it is. They love that because they know that we're not going to be addressing the systemic ills that are causing these issues in the first place. We're just think that we're making a big change by creating a big march and having masses moving down the street together. And that's one thing that we have to be aware of, is that we have to point out the harms that are existing today and that are influencing all of us. But on the other hand, we have to realize that the regulatory system, the EPA, was set up to regulate activists. It was set up to give the appearance that the government really cares and the government really is interested in protecting you. But in reality, it's there to set up regulations so the corporations have some general rules and guidelines for them to do their extraction and do their pollution. And if they exceed those guidelines or those rules, then there's some punishments in place, but they're tiny little punishments. And so that's just built into their business model. That's just part of the cost of doing business. And we'll see time and time again, these big pipeline companies or these big fracking companies, I mean, they have a list of violations of these regulations that are pages and pages long, and they don't even care.
No, they don't care because the fines are so small. It doesn't make any difference to them.
Yeah.
I have one more thing I'd like to just add to that, which is another way in which I think this work is exceptional, other than recognizing what the actual root causes are, is that in the communities where it's happened, it brings together people of different political opinions.
Yes.
And I don't think, I think one of the lessons that hopefully people of the liberal persuasion are getting from what happened just now is that if we don't build solidarity with all the people who are suffering from the current system and who think somewhat differently about it than we do, but who are suffering the same thing, we're not going to create a strong enough movement. And so I think that the work of the community rights networks and CELDEF and that's happening on the ground, there's liberals and conservatives who are doing it together, and it points a way forward for our fractured culture right now.
Yes.
An example of work that can bring us together in defense of what we love, and get past this ridiculous sort of way we've been conditioned left-right, which is just harming us, and it's just like the regulatory response in a way. It's conditioned, and it actually only ends up benefiting the people who are running the corporations and making oodles of money.
Yes, and if we can get together and recognize what we want,
yeah,
and around many issues, what we'll find is that we all want the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we've been divided, so that we don't get together and talk about the things that we want. I mean, we're supposed to rely on our elected officials to do that for us, but they don't work for us. We're not their bosses. They're not doing anything for us. They're doing what they're doing for their corporate
and so that's why
bosses.
This is such an amazing moment right now.
Yeah, and
so many people are waking up, and so now the task is to direct that waking up energy towards real change. And that's what this work and this book is about, and that's a very powerful and hopeful thing that hopefully we can get that message out there and that understanding out there, because it's not so simple. It's not a soundbite, and that is part of the problem for those of us who are communicators, is how do we really deepen the understanding in a culture that is just about reactive sound bites.
We're about giving rights, and we define ourselves as a movement because it's based upon granting rights to entities, whether they be individuals, communities, or nature. By granting rights, we are creating something of substantial fundamental value. We are doing something. We're manifesting something. We're, like you're saying, we're having a creative reaction to what's going on at this time, rather than reacting.
Yeah.
And so by granting rights of nature, if we grant rights to nature,
yeah,
we will be protecting nature. If we keep regulating how much pollution can go on and how much destruction of nature can occur, we are not protecting nature, we're destroying nature.
That's right. So just back to creative response,
yes,
as opposed to reactivity. And I feel like, everyone who's listening to this, come join us, read the book, and find people to join with in your local communities, because this issue is happening everywhere. Even if you're lucky enough not to face a mine, you might be facing a big box store that you have no control over, or a fracking well right next to your school, or a gravel pit, or there's a million of these things that go on in communities, and only a highway being built through your whatever it is,
or the police.
Yeah, and someone said, and I can't remember if it's one of the people who did a blurb on the book, but so if you don't really have local rights, if you have no local control, then where do you have them? Anyway.
Anyway, I think this is a very deep conversation, and I thank you very much. I think that you, of probably all people, are qualified to have this conversation, because you have followed this issue from start to finish in your book. It's a very well constructed explanation of community rights, told through the stories of the people all over this country who have done this work and who are currently doing this work. And I just really thank you so much for writing this, and look forward to everything you do in the future.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Anneke. And it'd be great to talk to you again, in about a year, when we have a chance to see how the public has responded, and how many have gone into regulatory system type activism, and those who've become involved in true movement building, creating rights for individuals, communities, and nature.
I agree with you. It will be interesting, and we will do this again. So thank you, Tom, for giving me a chance to talk.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you, Anneke. Bye-bye.
Bye.